Hello and welcome to episode number 44 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And well, last week we said confidently that this was going to be an easy week to pick. All of the matchups seemed straightforward, and boy, were we wrong.
Wow, I mean, you are not wrong. We were very, very wrong. I think of the teams projected to make the playoffs going into last week, only one of them won outright. That was me. Cam tied, and the rest of them lost. So there is like a lot to talk about, and not good for our pick'em records either. I mean, we luckily for me, we both basically picked the same matchups, but like even then. This isn't going to be pretty, but we'll get into that later. We got a great week lined up for you all here. Trade deadlines on Friday. You excited?
I am excited. I'm hoping that something happens. It's been pretty quiet, a lot of very small deals, but I feel like that's kind of how it is. And there'll be a big one within the next couple days. It'll probably open up the floodgates. I'm hoping so. I don't really have anything in the mix. I know you do, and I know there are a lot of big names that could be moved kind of soon.
Yeah, I think what's kind of happening is everybody's kind of jockeying for the best possible deal, knowing that there's still a little bit of time left, and it's actually worked for some teams. Some teams I've noticed have gotten better offers as they've kind of held on to the player and kind of like built up the demand for them. But and definitely at some point, you know, the straws to break and a trade actually has to happen. So I'll be curious to see how many trades go down at the deadline. So for some perspective here, over the past couple seasons during the season, in the 2018 season, we made 50 trades. In the 2019 season, we made 61 trades. And the 2020 season, and keep in mind, shortened season, we made 44 trades. We've only made 31 trades this season since opening day. So interestingly enough, I don't know if we're going to hit any of the trade numbers that we hit the previous season. Now, granted, we did have 95 trades this offseason, which was way more than the other off seasons. It was 55 and 16 in the two off seasons before that. But I will not be surprised if we approach the 44 trade mark from last season.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of the lack of trading, I think, just comes from the fact that there were so many trades made this offseason. People are just kind of happy with the players they have and just kind of riding with them after acquiring them so recently, because it's certainly not due to a lack of interest in the league and a lack of people being active in other ways.
No, exactly. This has been one of the more active and competitive years in the league, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But yeah, we'll talk about the players most likely to be traded in a little bit. But first and foremost, we got to talk about the trades from the last week. And there have been 5 of them. Most of them aren't that big. But the first couple, let's start with this one. Chris Sale was traded to Erik.
He was. Yeah, for Tristan Casas and Luis Medina.
Yeah, so what do you think about this deal?
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting. So I think from Ruthvik's perspective, this is very smart. He's rebuilding, or maybe not rebuilding, but definitely retooling. And Chris Sale's a 32-year-old pitcher coming off of Tommy John. He hasn't pitched since 2019. He struggled a bit the last time we saw him pitch in 2019. You know, he had kind of a homer problem, 1.47 homers per 9, had a 4.40 ERA. And, you know, I don't know how many teams want to gamble on a 33-year-old starting pitcher with, you know, a funky arm delivery, who's missed a year at TJ. So I know I wouldn't necessarily want to be the person gambling on that unless the price was cheap. And I don't think the price was cheap. I mean, Tristan Casas is a very good prospect. I really like Tristan Casas. He's actually a guy I owned a while ago, and I traded to Erik to get one of my favorites, Eddie Rosario. He's having a strong year in Double A with a 111 WRC plus. He's a 55 FB on Fangraphs, or their 21st overall prospect. And I genuinely think that he is the Red Sox first baseman of the future. I don't think it's Bobby Dahlbeck. I don't think it's Kyle Schwarber. I think when it's all said and done, Tristan Casas will be playing first base for the Red Sox. And I mean, I know Medina kind of has that. Apparently, there's another Luis Medina who is 58 years old and played for Cleveland in the 80s and the 90s, whose page I accidentally brought up. Let me pull up the actual Medina's page. Here we go. He was a 60th ranked prospect on Fangraphs going into the season with a 50 FV, but he's been pretty abysmal all season with really high walk rates in the minor leagues. And I'm not too high on him, but I think he's a decent gamble. But overall, I think Ruthvik wins this trade for what he wanted to do. I wonder if Erik could have used Casas to get a starting pitcher with a little less risk. Like, we just don't know what's going to happen with these pitchers coming off of TJ. But if he's back and healthy, I mean, Sale is a difference maker. So I think it's a big gamble, but maybe not one Erik needed to take.
Yeah, I think Erik overpaid for Sale here. I think he paid for a healthy version of Sale. Like you said, Casas is really kind of breaking out in the minors this year. And he was already a decent prospect, but he's kind of proving to be the Red Sox best prospect, even better than Jarren Duran. And Medina had maybe lost a little bit of his prospect shine, but he's still a top 100 guy in a lot of lists. And I feel like, Sale has missed so much time. His first start back was good, not great, promising that he didn't walk anyone, but he also gave up a couple homers. Or I guess
against Baltimore too, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, against Baltimore doesn't count. But so I don't. He is only 32, but just the injuries. I feel like Erik kind of bought high on him, and Ruthvik did a good job of getting rid of him. He's not part of this team's future, and he got a couple players who will be.
I mean, that being said, I guess the quick devil's advocate I'll play here is that from 2012 to 2018, Chris Sale finished no lower than 6th in the AL Cy Young voting. So he did have the down 2019, and he's obviously coming back now from TJ. But if he could bounce back, I mean, that's his ceiling. So maybe Erik knows something we don't. But I agree with you that I don't think there's anything there.
Mm-hmm. And the next trade was possibly an even bigger one.
A lot bigger.
Yeah. Jake and Clayton traded Mackenzie Gore, Elvis Martinez, and your 2022 first to the Deep Sea Devers in exchange for Zach Gallen and Jose Abreu. I think that Ruthvik did well here again. How about you?
Yeah, you and I talked about this earlier today, and I agree. Like, Gallen is not pitching like the Gallen we've seen in his first 30-ish starts in the major leagues. Let's pull up his Fangraphs page here. He has a 5.03 ERA with a 4.71 FIP. His walk rate's up to 4.17, and he has a 160 homer per nine. There are a lot of people in the industry who are not even really seeing him as a buy low because they think he's pitching injured. And honestly, I kind of buy that. He just does not look like the same pitcher this year. And especially a Diamondbacks ballpark that's, in theory, pretty pitcher friendly with the humidor. So I'm a little skeptical about his ability to bounce back, but then again, at the beginning of the season and last year's deadline, like Zach Gallen was atop my wish list of players to acquire.
Yeah, mine too.
So yeah, I mean maybe this is just a blip and he can bounce back, but I'm not totally sure. I'll have to say too, even when he was posting to sub 3 ERAs the past 2 years, which only came in 152 combined innings, he did have FIPS that were a run higher than those ERAs. So I'm not sure if maybe he's as good as we all thought. With respect to Abreu, he's not doing as well as a 166 WRC plus from last year. I mean, he's putting up respectable numbers this year: 338 OBP, 24 homers, 86 ribbies. I don't know about you, Cam. I don't know if like a 34-year-old first baseman is necessarily someone I'm really looking into buying into, especially one who, you know, is not hitting like he did in that MVP season. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think I don't want to write off Gallen because, like you said, everyone was so high on him last year. There was a bidding war that we both lost and Ruthvik won. But I mean, if you are selling low on him, then there are a lot worse returns you can get than this. And I always like the kind of deal where you're selling low on a guy, but getting the same return as if you were selling high on him. Like, for example, a couple of the Suarez deals, not this week's, and even the Chris Sale deal from earlier that day kind of felt like that. And I think the same is kind of true for Gallen because Aurelvis Martinez, this guy just hits. He's only, 19? Yeah, 19 years old, and hasn't been amazing in 51 plate appearances in high A, but he tore up rookie ball in 2019, tore up low A this year. And Max Brill said he's the best hitting prospect he's seen, and he's done a lot of scouting in the minors, so that's very high praise. And Mackenzie Gore, obviously former top 5 prospect, has kind of struggled a little bit. I'm worried he could be the next Forrest Whitley type. So he's lost a little bit of the shine. And is he currently hurt?
I don't know if he's currently hurt. I think what the situation is that he's in like their complex, like kind of working out some mechanical issues. Was the last I've heard, because he's only pitched 20 innings this year. So we also have to take into account this is a very small sample size, and he's still only 22 years old. So and especially after, the whole COVID year last year, I mean, it's very possible that, he's just trying to, get back on track a little bit. And we've definitely seen pitchers like that where, they have a bumpy year in the minors and they're able to rebound. So I'm not totally out on Mackenzie Gore right now, but at the same time, I mean, it's not just Forrest Whitley, but look at like Nate Pearson. I mean, he was like maybe the consensus top pitching prospect to come up last year, and look at what happened to him. Yeah, his stock's down now. Alek Manoah's kind of passed him on the Blue Jays pitching depth chart. So there's definitely some cautionary tales there. But I really like Aurelvis Martinez, and I think when you're including my 2022 first round pick, like, I think Ruthvik got a pretty good haul. And I know he was talking about how he was probably going to wait towards the deadline to see if Conor would send a big offer for Abreu. I don't think Conor at the time was necessarily ready to take on Abreu, but was still very interested. But the fact that Ruthvik was willing to trade him without really like waiting for Conor to get back to him, I think speaks volumes as to what he thinks about this return. One other tidbit I'll add: he almost traded Sale for Gore and another prospect. I think he would have had to give up a pick as well. Ruthvik would have. But he ended up going with the Costas offer because he really needed a hitter. But he was like, he still really wanted Gore. Gore has always been a guy he's wanted. So I think that kind of motivated him to turn around and go and do this. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one more quick thing on Gore before we move on. Yeah. It's a little concerning about Gore, the fact that the Padres, going into the season, it looked like he was going to be either in the opening day rotation or up very early, and now they need a spot, and instead of bringing Gore up, they're signing the corpse of Jake Arrieta.
Yeah, I have no. Jake Arrieta should not be pitching in the majors. Then again, Matt Harvey has held a job in a starting rotation all season. So, I mean, it feels like the threshold for being in a major league starting rotation is pretty low nowadays. But yeah, it speaks a lot. You're right. Well, let's move on to the next trades here. They are a lot smaller, so we won't
Yeah,
have to
we can
spend
kind of
too much.
rapid fire through them, especially the next two are uh, pretty similar since they're both ones you made.
Yeah, the first one was I traded Eugenio Suarez to both the Flow for a conditional pick, which is basically just the next third round pick that Jake and Clayton acquire between 2022 and 2024. If he doesn't give me a pick in that time, which is very unlikely, it converts into a second round pick. I traded for Suarez in April or early May, thinking that he could bounce back, kind of like he did last year, slow start, but bounce back over the last half of the shortened season. That didn't really pan out. I might regret giving up Gabriel Moreno in that deal. And I've since acquired guys like Brandon Nimmo and Michael Brantley, who have made Suarez expendable, as well as Tatis coming back. So I now have two healthy shortstop eligible players. So Jake wanted to take the gamble on him, and I wanted to clear roster space. So,
Yep, pretty standard salary dump.
yeah,
Not a salary dump because there's no salary, but just kind of getting rid of Suarez. You were going to cut him anyway, and
it was a fantasy equivalent of a
yeah,
salary dump.
exactly the roster spot dump.
Yeah,
Getting under your salary cap.
for sure. Let's do this next deal. I traded Carlos Carrasco, Anthony's 2024 second, and a conditional second, which kind of the same deal with the last trade. Second round pick between 2022 and 2024. If I don't give him one by the end of the 2023 season, converts to a first round pick. And I received Michael Brantley and Robert Poisson in return. Carrasco is a guy I've always liked, and this is actually really sad because he's been a Yellow Champ legend for 3 years now. And actually, if I remember correctly, he was my playoff pitching MVP last year. He had 3 quality starts between my 2 playoff matchups. So salute to Carrasco. Love the story. Love how he bounced back from cancer, but he's had 4 really bad starts. His first 2 were all right, but they haven't really stretched him out yet. I mean, I don't think he's thrown more than like 60-ish pitches in the majors. If this was April, I'd be happy to wait on him. But because it's now a couple of days before the trade deadline and a couple of weeks before the playoffs, and I already have 11 other starters, which is still too many, it felt appropriate to move on from him. The picks or whatever. With respect to my return, I think Brantley is a guy I've always really liked. I mean, he's a Yellow Champ legend that's also coming back. Shout out to the OG Brantley deal. If you remember Steven Gonzalez, that's what I got. That's what I gave Erik for Brantley. I don't think Gonzalez really did anything in the majors. Just maybe made a start. I don't even know. But Brantley, he's not going to give you a lot of runs. He's not going to give or home runs. He's not going to give you a lot of stolen bases, but he gets on base. He has an OBP of 383, is a 144 WRC plus this year, which is in the top 15 of WRC pluses. He might be a better real life player, but he's a high floor and he's just been uber consistent all year. And gives me a little more flexibility with maybe trading a bat. And Poisson is a prospect that I've always liked. I wanted to draft him a couple years ago, but Conor beat me to him. I then traded for him and then actually traded him to Jake in the offseason in the Springer and Muncy deal. So he hasn't been doing well at all this year, but he's still very young and still has a lot of upside. So I thought, why not as a throw in? I'll gamble on him.
Yeah, pretty much. Brantley is just kind of the picture of consistency, and it surprises me every time I look at him. I kind of in my mind, he's like, yeah, he's posting 110 WRC pluses, and he's just kind of doing okay year after year, and not really a super fantasy relevant guy, maybe just on like the back of a bench or something. But then I look and he's hitting 332. He's got a 144 WRC plus. He's having his second best hitting season ever, and he is just so steady and so good of a hitter. And he's not striking out at all. He's walking a little less than last year, but he's also striking out a lot less. And I think he's a great guy to get on the cheap. Poisson's a throw-in, even if he had a little bit of shine maybe this time last year. And yeah, Carrasco, I told you earlier that I have no interest in him, as good of a story as he is. But I think you did really well to get Brantley for cheap, and he's the type of guy that maybe Clayton and Jake would have wanted to keep for their stretch run.
Yeah, I think so too. I actually offered to trade him Carrasco just for picks, and he was insistent on doing a Carrasco deal for Brantley. So maybe he just really wanted to get rid of Brantley. But Brantley was a guy I was trying to get back in the offseason, actually, after I traded him away. So, I mean, he's the type of boring hitter that a playoff team needs if they're going to win a championship, because some of these big flashy guys can be a little inconsistent. He's not. So we'll see how this works, but I'm very excited to have him back, and hopefully he's part of another Yellow Champ championship. Well, let's move on to the last trade here. The Crone Zone traded Lorenzo Cain to Anthony for his 2025 second round pick. I personally didn't really get this for Anthony. I think Lorenzo Cain at this point is kind of waiver wire fodder. He's not been able to stay healthy. He has a 91 WRC plus this year. I mean, the 7 stolen bases are all right. He's only been able to play in 45 games this year. He hasn't been really above average since 2018. If he gave up a 2025 third round pick, I would have said fine, but I think Andrew did pretty well to get a second round pick. I was pretty shocked he did. I thought Andrew should have cut Cain like a couple weeks ago, considering he's rebuilding and Cain's like 35. So the fact that he got anything for Cain is genuinely impressive to me.
Yeah. First and foremost, I just want to acknowledge the fact that we have a new name in the league, and that is the Crone Zone. The team formerly known as the Will Smith, previously formerly known as I'm Like That, among other things, is now the Crone Zone. And we had both said that the Will Smith was one of our favorite team names in the league. How are you feeling about the Crone Zone?
I like it. Honestly, what I do like better is the name of his minor league team now is the Crone Zone. And that one named after CJ Crone. So, and the major league team named after Jay Cronenworth. So
that is very top tier. I like it a lot.
Yeah, a very top tier pairing here. There are a few team names here that I think go well with both the major league team and the minor league team having a name, like the big league Yellow Champs and the little league Yellow Champs. I know it might not be the most popular name, but I like the whole big little distinction there.
Are we doing an impromptu minor league team rankings?
Oh, I think we should. I really like Impending Danger Moose. Yeah. That's really funny. I think the Cronzon
might be number 1.
I think it is. I think Impending Danger Moose is definitely number 2, but I think the Cronzon's number 1.
Little League Yellow Champs is A tier.
Definitely.
Alex and Zach's minor league team is called Acuna Matata without Acuna, which is, I'm not sure if that's on purpose or if it's just because that was their major league team for so long. So that's kind of interesting. The Toby's is okay.
Angel Acuna.
Oh,
the Acuna Matata again.
Okay, I like that. That's solid.
That would be solid.
I think, sorry Yuki, but Moneyball Jr. is probably the worst.
Yeah, you can be more creative.
And I'm trying to think other what about half of the teams have named their minor leagues. I guess Team Resnick, it might be a little bit difficult for them to come up with something, but maybe Team Davis after your former owner Michael Davis.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, remember the one time he showed up. How different this league would be if I had a co-owner.
Ruthvik and Nick, the Deep Sea Devers could be the I don't know, the deeper sea devers. This is hard.
Oh, they have Tristan Casas now, so you kind of like the infielder, maybe something after that.
Maybe.
Red Sox infielder. They also have Jay Groom, I guess. So Red Sox pitching. I don't know. That one's kind of tough. See, Conor. What's Conor's team name right now?
Well, they're the off-white Sox, so maybe like something that's a little less similar to white, like the cream Sox.
I like that. The off cream Sox. See, Jake and Clayton are named Bo with the Flow. Maybe they could be I don't know, B with the F.
Yeah.
Take off the O and the low. That doesn't sound that good.
It doesn't make sense.
They could, I don't know.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to think of good minor league team names. That's screw the trade deadline.
They have Maximo Acosta. They could be Maximo with the Flow.
Maximo. Wait, I actually like that a lot. Oh my god. We'll have to tell them after we record. That's great.
Okay. But that's all the trades. I guess I didn't actually speak on the Cain trade, but I agree with you. But our main segment for today, are we ready to dive into that?
Yeah. How many, if you had to put a number, because I want to see which one of us is more correct on how many trades are going to go down in between now and the trade deadline, what number would you say?
Now, so right now it is exactly 10 p.m. on Tuesday.
Yes.
So, and trade deadline is midnight Friday. Did we officially move it to midnight, or is it still noon?
Yes, it's midnight, so 74 hours until the trade deadline.
Okay, I'm gonna say 9 trades.
Okay,
and then maybe a little under.
I was going to be a bit more optimistic, and I was going to say 13.
Well, all right. I said 9. You said 13. Let's hope we all go out, put our best foot forward, and make some trades.
Yeah, I hope so. It'll maybe we'll have 13 trades to talk about on the trade deadline next week, or in our post deadline episode. Could you imagine that?
And God, that would be a lot. Not as much as our 20 trade episode.
Oh, that was a fun one. Man, I hope these trades pile up quickly in the off season. We could do another 20 trades episode, because that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and we called it the trade extravaganza. So maybe we could have another extravaganza.
Well, especially because like half of those trades were like legitimate blockbusters too. It wasn't like we're talking about like, you know, Lorenzo Cain for a second round pick. You know, it was like, you know, some of these bigger names getting moved. So hopefully this happens again.
Yeah, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. But let's dive into our segment. And before we dive into the matchups, we're going to preview some of the players we think will be traded at this deadline and see kind of what the chatter is and what to expect in the coming few days.
Yeah, so I've done quite a bit of talking with some people around the league, and I've gotten a little bit of insight as to who might be available. I think one player that is guaranteed to move, and in fact, this team told me today this player is going to move in some capacity, is Sal Perez. He is a top-ranked catcher in fantasy per the player rater this year. He's hit 30 home runs. There are a few teams in this league who could use an upgraded catcher, including yours truly. Ruthvik almost traded him 2 weeks ago, but it decided to hold on, and I think the price has risen quite a bit. There are several teams in this mix, including some complicated deals I could follow, depending on who ends up getting Perez. And overall, I think that deal is the domino that's going to knock down some of these other deals. Because I think that's going to not only set off a chain where some teams might make some other trades that they wouldn't otherwise, but I feel like that is also kind of the top option for some of these teams, and they're going to resort to some other plans. So I think we're all just kind of sitting here waiting to see how that plays out. But this one could go down to the wire. I'm hoping not too late, but it's going to be interesting to see how this trade develops.
Mm-hmm. And there are how many teams in on him? At least 3, right?
There are 3 teams. With 2 teams to be a little simpler. With the 3rd team, there's some other factors involved, and I think that's what's kind of holding things up right
now. Gotcha. But yeah. So he's still very likely to be on the move, and hopefully he is, so that other people make trades. And you said that
he's a guarantee. He is a guarantee. He is the one player we're going to talk about today that I guarantee you will be moved. I can't say that for anybody else I'm going to throw out here.
Mm-hmm. One player that you said you heard a rumor on was a namesake for a team, Cody Bellinger. You think he might be moved?
Yeah, I think that Cody Bellinger could be an interesting buy low for teams. And when I say buy low, for the record, I still think he's going to cost a lot. Like, he won the MVP in 2019. The shoulder injury that he suffered in the playoffs, I think, is still clearly affecting him. And I think there is a little bit of risk moving forward if him and the shoulder never kind of really, properly heals, or if there's some lingering effects of it. But I think he can be had. And I'm not, 100% sure if he does get moved, but I have my suspicions that he could be available.
Mm-hmm. I think he could be. I think it's tough because he is a huge buy low guy, and I'm worried that the owners may value him more highly than any team that would be looking to purchase him. But one player that I've also heard a lot of buzz around is Bryce Harper. I know I made an offer on him. I heard that a team offered 3 top 100 prospects for Harper, so there could be some movement for him. I know we've talked about it for the last few weeks, but Harper could be on the move too.
Yeah, Harper's been on a tear recently too. I think he has like a streak here where he's an OBP above 500 over like a 20-game stretch or something like that.
It wouldn't surprise me. He's been on fire.
Let me pull this up here because the numbers are ridiculous. But all right, here are the splits. Last 30 days, 337 average, 504 OBP, 699 slugging, and a 1203 OPS plus. 6 not OPS plus, just OPS. 6 homers, 15 ribbies, 28 walks. So he's basically averaging a walk a game, maybe even slightly more over that stretch.
God, that is nuts.
Yeah, and he's stolen 4 bases too, so 5 category contributor.
God, I mean, I know I said this in the Slack a little while ago, but I don't know how it happened, but I suddenly found myself rooting for Bryce Harper kind of hard.
No, Bryce, I feel like is what was so overhyped there for a while that he's now like underrated.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, do you think he's a top 5 hitter in the league?
Well, conveniently, he has the 5th highest OPS in the league.
Well, there you go.
Maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, so those are a few guys. Who else are you thinking could be moved? Have you heard rumors, or maybe you want to start rumors?
Well, I know for a fact that I have a couple extra players that I need to move, and I think between Nimmo, Brantley, maybe Biggio, Cole Irvin, and Zach Eflin, I think one of those bats and one of those pitchers is probably going to move. So we'll see what happens there. I think sticking on the theme of catchers with from Perez, I think Real Muto and Posey could both be moved. Yuki's kind of still being a bit notoriously kind of stingy with holding on to them, but we'll see. Maybe as the deadline gets closer, I still think he has to move one or two of these catchers. But he also has Austin Nola, which I think might be the most available of the bunch from what I'm hearing. Robbie Ray has been a guy who's seemingly been on the trade block forever, but not really gaining much traction in trade talks. He's a 9th-ranked starter per the player rater, 288 ERA, 106 whip, 167 Ks. I mean, his walk rate, just the way it's dropped, has been insane. When Alex was on the podcast here a couple of weeks ago, we dove into it. But just to remind you all, Robbie Ray's walk rate last year was a 784. He has a 242 walk rate this year.
It's a lot better.
A lot better. I mean, his previous career low was a 345. So even from there, that's a full walk drop. Now, that being said, his FIP is 385. His ERA is 288. So it is a run higher. And I wonder if that's kind of depressing the price. But he is striking out 11K per 9. So he'll still be valuable with the Ks, even if, maybe the walks kind of increase. But like, I mean, he's been just consistently strong all year. I don't really see these numbers declining. Over his last 15 starts, he hasn't given up more than 4 earned in a start, and he's only done that twice. And he's averaging just 2/3 innings under 6 innings a start. I'm surprised none of these teams who needed a starting pitcher weren't going more after him. Actually, here's a question for you. This is one of my favorite things when they do in the sleeper or the bust. They do like one player or the other. If you're Erik and you had Tristan Casas, would you rather have traded for Chris Sale or Robbie Ray for this year, knowing that you're trying to compete for a championship?
Robbie Ray.
You see, I think so too. And I don't even think it's particularly close, especially because Robbie Ray's only 29. I mean, I don't think it's out of the question that the gains he's made in Toronto are sustainable.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, they've done pretty well with some of their pitchers this year. And I think Robbie Ray, getting those walks down, especially, I like him a lot going forward.
Same here. No, if you're a team that needs pitching, Robbie Ray, you might want to go get him. See if there's any other names I could think of before I turn it over to you. I can't think of any other big names. Is there anybody else you want to kind of highlight as maybe being on the move?
No. I guess I wanted to just say Adam Frazier can be had, certainly, as well as Jock Peterson from my team. I think I could maybe see Daniel Alex Gregg trading a Corey Seager, or maybe even like a Darren Ruff. There's not. I mean, he's hitting well. I don't know why he's only 3% owned. He's been hitting really well.
So the problem with Ruff is that there's a lot of players that just came back for the Giants, like Lamont Wade Jr. is still there, and Tommy LaStella got off the IL, and Brandon Belt got off the IL, and then you added Chris Bryant to the mix. I just don't know if the everyday playing time is necessarily going to be there moving forward. I don't know if he's a tradable asset, and I think Seager is kind of a long shot. I mean, I think they still like him, and I don't think anybody's going to pony up the price. I could see him if he gets moved more as an off-season move. I don't necessarily think he's a guy that's going to get traded in the middle of the year, but I could be wrong. There have been crazy names traded before in the middle of the season.
That is true.
And I'm sure there are plenty of names we haven't talked about that are either, have been discussed in trade talks, or might be surprise moves. I remember trading for Pete Alonso the night before the trade deadline, just making a very bold offer to Anthony, just saying like Giancarlo Stanton and Mitch Haniger, like what else would you need? Kind of as a last second, like ditch effort thing. So you never know.
Yeah, you really never know. And I'm excited to see. And next week we will have all of the trades, and maybe even a top 10 guy will be traded, like Acuna was traded last year.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what the biggest name traded is. There's already been some really big names traded this year. And even over the past couple of weeks, Sandy Alcantara and Chris Sale kind of stick out to me. I'm sure there are others I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but I am very excited for this trade deadline, as I am for every trade deadline. But the last thing I'll say is, especially for these teams kind of bunched up at 4 to 7 right now. So I'm talking like Anthony and Conor and Clayton and Jake and EBO. I think every move is going to be very consequential because the seeding, I think, is very important. And who makes the playoffs is going to be very important, especially if you're EBO, this is your last ride. You've lost in the finals twice. You have every incentive to want to, walk out as a champion. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be fun.
We will. And yeah, we've talked about this long enough. Let's dive into the matchups from last week. There were a lot of interesting ones. It's a good week when I have an embarrassing tie to Yuki and still come out of the week feeling better about my odds to win the bye.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, of all the teams who were projected to make the playoffs going into the week, only one of them won. It was me. Cam tied. All the other ones lost. And I don't think anybody saw this coming. But we're going to dig into all of this. And Cam, why don't you lead us off with the first matchup we're going to talk about?
Yeah, so the first matchup we're going to talk about is the reason why I'm feeling better about my playoff odds. And that is the fact that Erik lost last week to Bo with the Flow. He lost 6-5-1. Made it close at the end, tied quality starts, but ultimately could not get the tie, could not get the win. And that hurt him a lot and really helped Bo with the Flow get back even with EBO.
Yeah, let's talk about this from each of your perspectives, because I think there's a lot to unpack here on the ramifications of this. First off, I'll start with Bo with the Flow. Very good offensive week. I mean, 24 doubles, 53 runs, 15 homers, 47 ribbies, 354 OBP, all fantastic. The ERA and WHIP weren't quite there, but 5 quality starts and 5 saves will play. And with the way their offense played, I mean, they really only needed the saves to win saves to kind of get it, as well as tying quality starts. We talked about last week when Clayton and Jake lost that they might have a little bit of an uphill road to get back into the playoff seed, but they have now done it. They are maybe the biggest beneficiaries of the week because the projected 3, 4, 5, and 6 seeds all lost, so they are now tied with EBO for the 6th seed, but also only a game back of Anthony. And Anthony could legitimately miss the playoffs, which we'll dive into later. I don't want to do that now. Let's focus on Jake and Clayton. But that was a really impressive showing for Jake and Clayton, and exactly what they needed to be able to stay in this playoff hunt. From Erik's perspective, he really needed this to be able to stick with you in the hunt for the 2 seed. Had you lost to Yuki, this would have been fine for him. And it looked like you were going to lose to Yuki, and we're going to get to that matchup in a second, but you did it. So now what's difficult here for him is that he's a half game back with a much harder schedule than you. He plays me this week, and he's already down big pretty early on. And then he has to go and play Yuki and Daniel, Alex, and Greg. So not too bad the last 2 weeks, but definitely kind of hard there. You, on the other hand, have Daniel, Alex, and Greg this week, then Anthony, and then Alex and Zach. So you have an easier schedule. You're a half game up. And if he loses this week, he's a game and a half back of the 2nd seed with 2 games left, which means you would have to lose out and he would have to win out, which I don't see happening. So Erik's chances of getting a bye are on life support, and I don't think he's going to get it.
I agree. This was this was one he needed to win. And Clayton and Jake are a tough team to play. I mean, they've already beaten me, and now they've beaten Erik.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. Rank these teams in the order that you would rather play them come playoff time. Erik, Clayton and Jake, EVO, Conor, and Anthony. And for why not? Throw me in that mix.
So I guess I would most like to play Anthony and then Conor. And then And then I'd probably most like to play Clayton and Jake, followed by EBO, Erik, and then I would least like to play you.
I think that would be a very similar order to me, and I think there's tier breaks there. I think like you, me, and Erik are kind of a tier of teams I wouldn't want to play the most, and that I think it's Clayton and Jake and EDO in the middle, where I think the top teams are better than them, but they can make it really interesting and pull off an upset, as we saw with Clayton and Jake with Erik, and then I think Anthony and Conor are the two weakest teams. So I agree with you. Any other thoughts on this matchup?
Nope, that's about it. Erik had 90 strikeouts, which was good. His pitching was solid. And his hitting, Erik didn't play that bad. His hitting was kind of uninspired. Clayton and Jake hit the ball really well. They had 24 doubles. And yeah, 374 on base. And their pitching counting stats were good. The rate stats were not, but they did well enough.
Yeah. We'll see if Erik can bounce back this week, but boy, this is not a good situation he's in right now.
It is not. But the second matchup we wanted to talk about was me and Yuki tying. And I guess I want to thank Luis Sessa for this tie. He's not on either of our teams, but in the Reds game on what was it? It was Sunday. Sessa came in to a 7-3 game, allowed a run, made it a save situation for Michael Givens to come in and get a 4-out save, get me my tying save. I ended up getting a Jake McGee save later that day. Those were my only two saves of the week, and that's what it took to tie Yuki. So thank you, Luis Sessa, for giving up a run so that the Reds won 7-4 instead of 7-3.
Yeah, congratulations to you for pulling it off. I mean, not only him, but like Chris Bubich, I think gave up like 7 earned in an inning and a third, and gave up 9 hits doing that as well, which brought Yuki's whip just up enough where you beat it by like 0.01 or something like that.
Yep, 0.01.
Funny enough, I mean, if you look at Yuki over the past, what is it, 3 weeks now, he's beat me and he's tied you. The two teams that are going to get a bye. He is 1-0-1 against us. And he is 3-11-1 against the rest of the league.
Man.
Maybe and it's funny because I feel like, especially me, I've been shit talking Yuki on this podcast a lot as having the worst team. And I mean, I did beat him the first time, as did you, but this second time around wasn't as good for the both of us. So he's getting a little bit of revenge, especially on me, handing me my first loss of the season. You've since handed me my second loss, but good for Yuki. I'm happy for him. There's some talent on this team, and he's pretty much locked up like the worst playoff odds. So you know it is what it is.
I mean, he's still tied with the bellies, but yeah, he.
Well, the worst 4 teams are going to get 20% playoff.
That's true. Yeah,
20% chance in the lottery. So I guess it only affects the second and third round picks at this point. But Daniel, Alex, and Greg have won 2 straight. So
man,
yeah,
Yuki's been great.
Before we get into that, guess who's the longest winning streak in the league currently?
I mean, yeah, Daniel, Alex, and Greg won 2 in a row. Is that the longest winning streak in the league?
That is the longest winning streak in the league.
God, now they're facing me. I'm facing the hottest team in the league.
Actually,
arguably for the 3rd week in a row.
Yeah. Here's a fun one
Honestly,
too.
arguably for the fourth or fifth week in a row, because EBO was super hot when I faced them, and then before that was Erik.
Yeah, man, brutal schedule for you, but you're coming out on top here.
Yeah.
Um, but so only Daniel, Alex, and Greg, and Alex and Zach had the same result this past week that they had the week before. So Daniel, Alex, and Greg won the last 2 weeks, and Alex and Zach lost the last 2 weeks. Everybody else had a different result last week than they did the week before, which I think also speaks volumes as to how unpredictable this has been with all the top teams losing last week.
Yeah, just a crazy, unpredictable week, and I guess we're talking about that matchup now. They beat EBO 8-4, just an absolute shocker. 380 on base percentage. And they outpitched them. I mean, they didn't have a ton of quantity, but they had a 231 ERA, a 116 whip. They had enough strikeouts and quality starts, and the 59 RBIs was way more than enough to win. And just they didn't even luck into it. They won pretty handily, and they played well doing it.
Yeah, I have 59 ribbies, like 231 ERA. I mean, these are fantastic numbers. And I mean, again, I think this is the downside of the EBO strategy. It's, they're not going to win Ks, they're not going to win quality starts, and if they have a couple bad relief outings, you see the high ERA and what they had 370 ERA, which isn't that high before their strategy should be a lot lower, and you have the high whip. And they're only winning 2 offensive categories. So if they're not winning those offensive categories and they're not winning they're not their relievers aren't pitching well, it's not going to end well for them. That being said, I think they're going to bounce back, and I mean they're still very much in the race for a playoff spot, but they really had the opportunity to keep themselves in the driver's seat for a 6th seed, and they are very much not anymore. I think with Clayton and Jake playing really well, I mean, if I had to guess which one of these teams is going to get it, I think it's Clayton and Jake. And I don't know how this works in the playoff bracket, but currently Clayton and Jake hold the 6th seed in the projected playoff bracket with the same record, which to me indicates that they own a tiebreaker, which could make it tricky. But that being said, EBO plays Clayton and Jake the last week of the season, and I think that could determine who makes the playoffs and who sits out potentially.
Yeah, I think it will. And I just think it's really fun. Well, first of all, EBO, good on them for tying the holds record. One of 2 records that was tied this week.
And they tied my record? Damn.
Yep, they tied your record. Yeah, the other record, which was tied.
I'm surprised because it's usually flipped with them. They usually have like 10 saves and 2 holds, but I guess with like Kimbrel now setting up for Liam Hendricks, kind of shift the balance of power for them.
Yeah. But I think it's just very fun that they're 6-6-6. EBO has made a deal with the devil here.
They have. The deal with the devil is they leave the league at the end of the year, but maybe they end up winning a championship in unlikely fashion.
In unlikely fashion. I mean, they'd have to beat either me or Erik in the first round, which would be very tough, but doable.
I mean, so they'd have to, well, especially if they enter in as a 6th seed, they'd have to beat you or Erik, and then they'd either have to play whichever one of you doesn't get the bye, or they'd have to play me in the 2nd round. And they very much could have to, if they advance to the finals, would probably have to play one of those 3 teams. I mean, I think their path to winning a championship would probably mean they'd have to sweep you, me, and Erik. And if they do that, they deserve the championship, like undoubtedly. But it's going to be tough. I don't think any team no team has won a championship yet without having a bye, with the exception of the first season, when only 4 teams made the playoffs. So it'll be an uphill battle.
It will be, and no team besides you, Erik, or EBO has had a bye. So a lot might be changing this year. We'll see if EBO can make a run in the playoffs, if they do make the playoffs at all.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. It's going to be really interesting down the stretch. As for Daniel, Alex, and Greg, quickly, good for them. Nice to see them win a couple. Nice to see that they're not just pushovers at the end of the season. And who knows, maybe it'll factor into the trade deadline quite a bit. But maybe I'm being a bit optimistic. But you want to move on to the next matchup?
Yeah. Let's see here. They're all interesting. But how about the fact that Anthony lost to Andrew this week, 7-5,
Yeah,
the
there you
Chrome
go.
Zone.
Here's another upset. I predicted them to tie. You predicted Anthony to outright win. That's the only place this week where we disagreed in our picks. I told you when I made the pick last week is I thought there could be some funny business here, just with the way Anthony's not been playing like a playoff team, and Andrew's kind of had a little bit of magic all year. And boy, did that magic show up this week. I mean, look at these offensive numbers: 57 runs, 21 doubles, 24 homers, which ties the record. I don't think we've had a team post or we haven't had too many teams post 2020 weeks where they get 20 plus doubles and 20 plus homers. 68 ribbies. I mean, that's close to the record. Like the 5 stolen bases, a solid 364 OBP. I mean, they swept the offensive categories and none of them were particularly close.
They were not. I mean, 24 homers, that ties the league record also. That's the second record that was tied this week.
Yeah. Big record tying weeks this week. They weren't as strong in the pitching end, but the one hold was enough to win one more pitching category that got them the 7-5 win. So good for Andrew. We've talked a lot about him this year as just someone who's been fighting hard. I think there's a lot of talent on his team. Now it's about putting it together, but I think he's building the team the right way. But I want to talk about Anthony here. And I want to ask you this question, asking you all the tough questions today. If you had to pick one team to miss the playoffs between Anthony, Conor, Clayton, and Jake, and EVO, which team do you think is missing the playoffs? And so I've told you, some of these other team schedules, but just to give you some perspective on what Anthony's rest of the season schedule is, he plays EVO this week, and he plays you, and then he plays Conor. So that's 3 very tough matchups. Do you think he's a team missing the playoffs, or do you think it's someone else?
God, that is tricky. I think Connor's in.
I think so too. I think he's teams up on EVO and Clayton and Jake for just to give some perspective for everyone.
Yeah. So let's look at Anthony, his record against the other teams. He's facing EBO now. He is currently losing. It's only Tuesday. He also he tied EBO the first time, so this is going to be the tiebreaker between the two of them. Against Bo with the Flow, he split the series with them, so it'll go to the second tiebreaker. God, he's got a tough schedule the rest of the way. But also, Bo with the Flow has a similar tough schedule. They have got, they got Ruthvik. So that's, they're probably, they're big favored, or they're pretty favored to win that. And then they've got Andrew, but then they've got EBO at the end. God, I mean, Anthony does have that game advantage. I don't think it looks great for him.
And I don't either.
Yeah.
I think he could legitimately lose out, and I would not be surprised if he did.
I would not be surprised either.
Yeah, and then it just kind of becomes a question of is the game lead enough? And it does help that EBO and Clayton and Jake have to play each other once, because that'll be a guaranteed loss for one of them. But this is the first time I really think that Anthony legitimately might not make the playoffs, and I don't know what odds I'd put on that. I still think if I was a betting man, just because he has a game lead, and I think he could sneak one off of Conor, I do think that he will make the playoffs, but like I think I could change my mind on that like within like the next 5 minutes. And honestly, after I said that, I'm like, do I actually really believe that? So
I mean, statistically speaking, they all have better than 50% chances of making the playoffs, luckily. Most likely. It's just one of them's gonna miss it. But uh, they've all got solid chances individually, I guess, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Since
that
two
makes
of the
sense.
three of them do have to make it.
Exactly. I think it's too premature to figure out, who's going to be the team that's out or who's going to be the team that's in, because I think you're right. They are all pretty likely. We should get some more clarity on that this week. But I mean, man, this is I don't know. I don't think we've not had this in recent years where like I feel like a couple weeks out, it's been kind of pretty clear who the playoff teams are going to be. And I know it's not like the 10 teams within 2 games that we had a couple weeks ago, but like it's going to come down to the last week. And I don't think we've had that the first 3 years.
Absolutely. And it'll be exciting. And for Anthony's sake, I hope he gets in.
For his sake, I do as well. He does have a fun team that I enjoy kind of watching.
And he's getting Mike Trout back.
Maybe. I mean, he keeps getting pushed back. Like, at what point are they just going to shut down Trout? Because they're not going to make the playoffs. Get him healthy for next season.
I mean, I don't know.
What's the advantage for them to have him come back for 10 games at the end of the season? You're already drawing in the fans with Ohtani.
That's true. I mean, just kind of giving him at bats.
Yeah, but it's Mike Trout. I don't think Mike Trout needs at bats to like be ready for next year.
Maybe. But anyway, so yeah, there are two matchups that we haven't talked about yet. Which of those would you want to start with?
Let's start with me versus Conor, because that had more playoff implications than the other matchup. In fact, the other matchup has zero playoff implications. But as I mentioned, and I feel like I've used this phrase like a million times when it comes to Conor now, but Conor's had some opportunities to show that he could really play with the big boys, and he didn't. He kind of came close to showing up this week, but it didn't quite work out. As going into Sunday, I actually had a legitimate chance of 12-0ing him, and it didn't quite work out because he had kind of a monster Sunday, but it just was not enough. 16 homers, 44 ribbies, very solid, but he got blown out in runs and doubles, didn't post a stolen base, and his OBP was only 317. 79 strikeouts was nice, but pretty mediocre across the board in the rest of the pitching categories. 3 quality starts, 2 saves, 1 hold, 45 ERA, and a 128 whip. I had a very solid offensive week overall, 62 runs, 19 doubles, 2 stolen bases, 331 OBP, just narrowly missed beating Conor in homers and ribbies. And I did just enough in the pitching categories to beat him. So this wasn't my strongest week, and I thought Conor could have maybe taken advantage of that, but he wasn't ultimately able to do so. I think for me, it's nice to get back in the win column after a really rough month stretch with the tie to Alex and Zach, and the loss to Yuki, and getting blown out against you last week, which was just absolutely frustrating. So I'm glad I bounced back, especially, raising my confidence a bit going into a matchup with Erik. And thankfully, with everybody else losing and you tying, I'm pretty sure I've clinched the 1 seed, because in theory, we could finish with the same record because you're 3 games back if I win out, or if I lose out and you win out. But I think I win the second tiebreaker, which would be record against the division. I have one loss and one tie against the division. You definitely have more than that against your division. So, I'm kind of cruising here over the next 3 weeks. The only thing I can think of now that's kind of stressful for me is what am I going to do at the next couple days before the trade deadline? But I think for Conor, he's probably got the 4 seed wrapped up, but I don't know if he could play with the big boys. I don't think he's shown enough for me to think that he has a legitimate shot at beating Yuki or Erik in a playoff matchup.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I guess anything can happen in 1 week, but I've beaten him twice, and I didn't feel particularly worried either time. He does have the potential. He's done it a few times for his pitching to just absolutely go off and post ERAs and whips under 2, ERA under 2, whip under 1. So that's always kind of a lingering threat. But again, I didn't really see anything this week that made me see him as anything other than a kind of a 4-5 matchup, maybe making the second round, but getting beaten pretty bad in that round.
Yeah, I think so too. I think as you mentioned earlier, I think you said Conor was the only Anthony is the team you'd rather face of the potential playoff teams, and I think I agree. And it's he's racked up the wins somehow, but as I was saying earlier in the year, I think next year is more his year. It's not this year. So, good season so far, but I expect the future to be a bit better than the rest of this year. Anything else, or do you want to dive into the last matchup here?
Let's dive into the last one. And the Deep Sea Devers finally got back in the win column. They had a 6-3 win over the Chicken Tendies, who are now 4-10-4.
Yeah, not really a special week from Ruthvik. 11 homers, 34 ribbies, pretty average. 14 doubles, 39 runs as well. 4.47 ERA and a 1.46 WHIP. We're not very good. Only 3 quality starts in 9 starts, but enough to beat Benintendi's Chicken Tendies. I really like what both of these teams are doing right now. I think Alex has built up a nice pitching staff, and I think Ruthvik is making some solid trades that setting him up a little better. I think he's finally recognized that he has too many pitchers and not enough hitters, and I think he's kind of shifting his attention back towards acquiring hitters like Brandon Marsh, got Arelis Martinez. He's traded away Sale and Maley and Gallen in Abreu. I think Gallen might be the only one that he could potentially really miss when it's all said and done. But that requires him bouncing back. But it's just neither of these teams' years. So, good to see that they're both competing. I think the future is brighter for both of these teams, but this just isn't the year.
Yeah, it's really not. And just like last week for Ruthvik, both teams had pretty dismal RBI numbers. Not as bad as the previous week, but 26 for the Tendies and 34 for the Devers is just not great. And the pitching was not good for either team. And just as a team that was supposed to thrive on its pitching, Ruthvik's team has just not impressed in that category at all. And the hitting hasn't really surprised anyone. And it's just kind of been a rough year.
Yeah, kind of a shame. I think he bounces back next year, but you're right. It just things are not working out for him this year. Let me ask you one last question before we go into our next segment, because I am loving all these questions I'm asking you today. Ruthvik and Nick were almost made it to the finals last year. Their semis matchup came down to Sunday against EVO. And Alex and Zach were a playoff team last year. Which team is more likely to make it into the playoffs next year?
I think Ruthvik and Nick, because Alex and Zach, they had a lot of flaws with their team. and they got in last year as the 6th seed, and it was kind of a surprise that they were in. They weren't maybe they weren't maybe the 6th best team on paper, and they have made a lot of moves I've liked this year. But I still think Ruthvik and Nick's struggles have, to an extent, been due to injury, and I think that they're likely to bounce back at least a little bit.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. As much as I like what Alex and Zach are doing, I think that Ruthvik and Nick have the higher upside, and I think they just have objectively more talent. I mean, they saw Betts, Bregman, Acuna, DeGrom, and Bieber, and when 4 or 5 of them are missing significant time on the season, you're not going to win.
But yeah, let's dive into next week, unless there's anything else you want to talk about.
Nothing else I want to talk about. No, let's dive into next week. What is our matchup to watch?
Yeah, so there are a few matchups that we wanted to watch. Just a lot of intrigue going on this week. But I figured that the most interesting one was going to be EBO versus Anthony. Both teams kind of trending in opposite directions. And if EBO wins this week, I believe they will be. Will they be tied with Anthony in the standings?
If Anthony loses, yes.
Yeah, God, and that would be just a massive result. That would push Anthony down into that fight for the 6th seed, just fully in that fight. And then if but with the Flow wins, then that would give them a 3-way tie, and it would just be a total mess down there for the 5, 6, 7 seeds. And Anthony just really wants to get a win, secure a spot in the playoffs, and just avoid that whole mess. And EBO, if they can find a way to get the 5 seed and have to face Conor instead of me or Erik, that would be huge in terms of getting them back to the semis.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, as someone who roots for chaos, I kind of hope EBO wins to make this a 3-way tie. And it'd be really interesting to see what the tiebreaker would be if they had to break a 3-way tie for the 5, 6, and 7 seeds. I genuinely don't know the answer to that question.
I would not envy Erik in that situation.
No, I wouldn't, but I think ESPN has some sort of default that it would set it to for a tiebreaker for that, and I think you just go with whatever that says.
See, I don't know if I trust ESPN to do it in a fair way.
I don't either, but we're gonna have to. It's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out. But they both desperately need this win, and I really don't know who's gonna come out with it. And maybe it would just be easier to predict them to tie. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll see. But yeah, kind of an honorable mention. You're facing Erik this week. If Erik loses to you, then that basically guarantees me as 2 and Erik is 3. And that's kind of exciting. You've basically got 1 locked up, but just always fun to see you and Erik go at it.
Yeah, always fun. We've had I lost to him in the finals last year. We've had some, or not last year, the year before. We've had some pretty intense matchups over the years, and always exciting to play him. I beat him the first time this year. Let's see if I can sweep him and pick up another dub.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And let's go into picking the matchups where we both did pretty badly last week. What are the standings sitting at?
Yeah, we both did pretty badly is an understatement. Also, sorry if me. I correctly predicted myself to win, so good for me. But I predicted you to win. You tied, so that didn't really end up well. I predicted EBO to win. That didn't end up so hot. I predicted Alex and Zach to win. That also didn't work out. I predicted Erik to win. That didn't work out. And I predicted Anthony and Andrew to tie. And Andrew ended up winning, which means I was 1-3-2 on the week. As for you, you correctly predicted me to win, incorrectly predicted yourself to win, incorrectly picked EBO to win, incorrectly picked Alex and Zach to win, incorrectly picked Erik to win, and incorrectly picked Anthony to win. So you were 1-4-1 on the week. That is by far the worst week for both of us. Actually, I take that back. You finished 1-4-1 on one of the early weeks here. I want to say that's week 6, I think it is.
God.
The last
rough week,
yeah.
But I don't mind because it meant a lot of upsets.
Yeah, you gained a half game on all the playoff teams but me, so I mean, it worked out for you overall. This means I am 65, 27, and 16. You are now 56, 28, and 24. You break, or we finally break, like for the last 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, we've had the same exact number of losses. You now have 1 more loss than me, but yet you have 8 more ties than me, and I have 9 more wins than you. So I am 65, 27, and 16. You are 56, 28, and 24, and doesn't look like you're going to bounce back in or pick them, but anything can happen. Do you want to go first this week? Maybe make me have to be the one who has to be defensive on making some different picks, or do you still want me to go first?
You know what? I'll go for it. Might as well. Let's go.
All right. Yeah, let's hear these picks.
Let's hear these picks. I think I am going to beat the Bellies. I think Conor is going to beat Moneyball. I think that I think EBO is going to beat Anthony. I think Andrew and the Tendies are going to tie. I think Clayton and Jake are going to beat Ruthvik and Nick. And I think you're going to handle Erik.
Let me finish writing that down. All right. Time for me to pick. I will pick myself to beat Erik. I will pick you over the Bellies. I will pick Conor over Yuki. I will pick. I can pick EBO and Anthony to tie. It's Anthony's not playing that well, but EBO, they tie a lot and they're kind of funky with how they play. I'm gonna pick a tie.
I like it.
I think Alex and Zach are going to, maybe not, because they're playing Andrew. I'm gonna pick Andrew to outright win. I think he'll pull it out. I think Clayton and Jake are gonna win. And I don't think that's going to be particularly close. So we have a couple different picks this week. We each picked a different tie. So you could make up some ground this week.
I could. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to all the matchups this week and hopefully getting a clear picture of what the playoffs are going to be like and who will all be facing.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Sure, next week at this time, we're going to have a mega crazy episode to record with all the trades. And I am really looking forward to this. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. Just have a good week, everyone. And keep on keeping on.
Yeah, good luck to everyone on the trade market, except for everybody who wants the players that I want. No reflection, swearing all I see is you.
falling me into.
This podcast is good.